It was summer in Saint-Étienne, southern France, and the heat scorched the wooden stands of the Club Équestre du Lit. It was the most anticipated day of the year, the Grand Dressage Challenge, a spectacle mixing tradition, high-stakes betting, and a generous dose of arrogance. At the center of the arena, a black wild horse, muscles rippling under its sweaty coat, neighed furiously. Its name? Lightning. And no one could get close to him without getting hurt. 8 men had already tried. All ended up on the ground, some with minor injuries, others with pride completely shattered. High above, in an isolated air-conditioned box, a man laughed loudly between sips of champagne. Vincent Charpentier, 52, pharmaceutical industry tycoon, owner of the horse and the competition, crossed his legs with disdain as he watched the competitors fall one by one. The crowd roared. The announcer tried to keep the pace upbeat, but everything revolved around the beast at the center. "I offer 100,000 euros to anyone who can ride that horse for 5 minutes, Vincent shouted mockingly into the microphone. But let me warn you, Lightning wasn't made to obey. The crowd went wild. It was like a modern Roman circus, screams, bets, cell phones raised. As the security escorted the last limping contestant out, an old man in a worn-out hat and faded cotton shirt slowly walked toward the arena entrance. His shoulders were hunched, his eyes tired, his hands trembling. "Is he here to hand out flyers?" One of the wranglers laughed. "Gonna ask for an autograph or die trying?" Another mocked, but the old man didn't answer. He simply handed over a small registration form. The gatekeeper chuckled. "You sure you want to do this, Grandpa?" "More than ever, son. More than ever." The name written on the paper, with slightly shaky letters, was Alain Dumas, 70 years old, retired. Word spread quickly through the stands. "An old man's gonna try to tame Lightning. He can barely walk straight." But no one knew why Alain was really there. It wasn't fame. It wasn't pride, it was urgency. His wife Jean had a weak heart. The health insurance no longer covered her tests. The only clinic that could see her required a down payment of 9,000 euros. Alain didn't have a cent, but he had something money couldn't buy: history. The announcer hesitated as he called the next name. Next rider, Alain Dumas, 70 years old. The crowd laughed. Some booed, others clapped sarcastically. In his box, Vincent laughed louder than ever. "This I have to see up close. Let the games begin." Alain stopped a few meters from the gate. He removed his hat, took a deep breath. His hands trembled, but not from fear. It was Parkinson's, his companion for the past 5 years. He looked to the sky and murmured, "For her I will." Lightning neighed loudly at the sight of him approaching. The crowd screamed. The security guards got ready. But Alain didn't run. He didn't hesitate. He simply walked, step by step, eyes locked with the horses. Silence, total, as if even the wind had stopped. Lightning snorted, stomped, but did not attack. Alain stopped in front of him, and, instead of staring him down like an enemy, he removed his hat in respect. "You're not a monster, no, just tired of being treated with cruelty." The tension was like a rope about to snap, but nothing snapped. Lightning took a step forward. Alain extended his hand, and the horse touched his palm with its muzzle. Up above, Vincent suddenly stood. "What's going on?" In the arena, no one moved. Alain turned around, slowly walked to the saddle, climbed as if stepping into an old memory. The horse, once wild and violent, stood still, almost reverent. The announcer couldn't speak. The camera trembled in the cameraman's hands. And the crowd, once mocking, now just watched. Lightning walked, not as one who obeys out of fear, but as one who recognizes a presence. Alain kept a steady hand on the reins, but did not pull, did not impose. He simply followed, as if the connection between him and the horse was older than anyone there could imagine. "This must be a trick," murmured one of the riders who had mocked before. They drugged the beast, or that old man made a pact with the beyond. But the truth was something else. Up above, Vincent was sweating. His whiskey sat untouched on the table. There was something in that old man's eyes that unsettled him, as if they were witnessing something money could never buy. In the arena, the announcer regained his voice with difficulty. Alain Dumas has been on lightning for 3 minutes and 20 seconds, and the animal remains calm. The audience, still in shock, began to react. Some applauded in silence. Others kept their jaws dropped. But Alain didn't look at the stands. His gaze was in the past. Years ago, when he and Jeanne still lived in the countryside, Alain raised horses. Not out of vanity, out of vocation. He had hands that knew how to listen, eyes that understood without judgment, and the heart of someone who doesn't tame, but cares. It was during one of those births, under a night of rain and urgency, that he first saw a foal born in his hands. It was fragile, frightened, black as night. He named it Éclair, lightning in French. But life, cruel in its precision, took everything. The farm went bankrupt. Jeanne fell ill for the first time, and Alain, on his knees, had to sell the animals, including Éclair, including the horse that now, years later, carried him with reverence at the center of an arena. "You remember me, don't you?" Alain murmured, stroking the mane. Lightning turned his head slightly. He seemed to listen. He seemed to remember. "You were just a scared little foal, and I was just a man trying to survive. We got lost, didn't we, my friend?" The horse's eyes moist, the man's eyes tired, but in that moment time disappeared, and it was as if that saddle, that breath, that silent connection were the cure to something no medicine could reach. Vincent stood in his box. "This can't be happening. This horse never obeyed anyone." One of his aides approached, hesitant. "Sir, maybe he knew the animal from before." "From before? It's possible." He mentioned an old name. "Éclair." Vincent froze. It started to click. "Wait, I bought this horse from an unknown breeder about 15 years ago. It was sold in a desperate auction. It belonged to a man named Dumas." Silence. "He was the owner." In the arena, the timer hit 0. 5 minutes. The announcer composed himself. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a winner." The crowd erupted, but the sound was different. It wasn't the euphoria of a bet. It was an ovation of the soul. Alain dismounted with difficulty, his knees trembling, Parkinson's shouting, but his heart held him up. Lightning, now free, remained at his side, like a squire, like a son rediscovered. One of the officials approached, prize envelope in hand. He looked awkward, as if that sum wasn't worthy of such truth. "Congratulations, Mr. Dumas. Here it is, 100,000 euros in cash." Alain took it gently, but he didn't look at the money. He looked at the horse. "It's not for the money. It's for who he was, and for who I was with him." Vincent came down from his box, still stunned. The crowd parted. He walked like someone carrying a burden he never knew he had. He stopped in front of Alain, looked into his eyes for the first time. "That horse, it was yours, wasn't it?" Alain simply nodded. There was no anger, no pride, only truth. "I didn't know. Forgive me." Alain extended his hand. "You only bought him. I was the one forced to sell." And then, with a simple gesture, Alain turned, put the envelope in his ear pocket, and with Lightning by his side began to walk out of the arena. No speech, no fanfare, but with the kind of dignity the world has forgotten how to write. Outside the arena, the sun was already beginning to set as Alain walked toward the old blue pickup truck waiting in the dirt parking lot. Lightning, unbound, followed calmly. No harness, no commands, only belonging. "Hop in, partner, like the old times," Alain murmured, opening the improvised back door lined with straw and canvas. The horse, huge, powerful, but silent as a whisper, climbed in calmly. In the front seat, The envelope with 100,000 euros trembled in fingers marked by time. It was a lot of money, a lot for someone living on a pension, a lot for someone who hadn't eaten meat in weeks to save up. But Alain wasn't thinking about luxury, nor revenge. He was thinking about Jean. The house at the end of a gravel road was simple, faded paint, old roof, but it was home. And in the back room, lying in worn-out sheets, was Jeanne, pale, fragile, but alive. Alain entered slowly, sat beside the bed, touched her hand tenderly. "Jeanne, I did it." She opened her eyes slowly, even with the fever. She smiled, a smile almost imperceptible but full of soul. "You tamed the horse," she murmured. "No, I just reminded him who we were." The next morning, Alain went to the pharmacy with the envelope. The pharmacist, a young man who barely used to greet him, recognized him from afar. "You're the old man with the horse. Everyone saw it, and it's on every channel." My dad cried watching. Alain smiled discreetly. "I need the medicines. All of them." "For how long?" The pharmacist looked at him with moist eyes. "Let's do this differently. You gave us something priceless. Medicines? These are on us." Alain tried to refuse, but the young man insisted. He was sincere. "You taught us more than many books. And you gave this town hope again." That same day, the video went viral. 70-year-old man Tame's untamable horse and moves. France, who is the man who made a wild horse yield with just a look? Story of love, memory, and resilience moves the nation. The footage showed the silent arena, Alain riding, and the stunned crowd. Newspapers, TV shows, even politicians wanted to know more, but Alain just wanted time. Time with Jean, time with lightning, time with the things life had nearly taken from him. In the following days, the house began to fill. Children came to meet the horse. Young people came for advice. Elders came to cry. Alain humbly, simply listened. Sometimes he said a phrase or two, but those who listened left, changed. A journalist asked, "What did you feel when you mounted that horse?" Alain thought for a moment. "I didn't ride a horse. I rode a story, and the story rode me." Vincent Charpentier showed up one day without cameras, hat in hand, face worn. "I came to say thank you." "Thank you for what?" Alain asked, curious. "For reminding me that not everything is for sale, for showing me that respect is rarer than gold." He paused. "And I wanted to try to buy the horse back." Alain looked at Lightning calmly grazing in the yard, then looked at Vincent. "He's not for sale because he's not mine. He belongs to memory, and memory, it can't be bought." Vincent nodded. For the first time, he understood. Jean began to get better. Color returned to her face, and Alain, even with his body still tired, seemed more alive than ever. In that small house, among medications, silence, and pasture, a story was being rewritten. A life was being restored, and an old man no one had taken seriously was teaching the world what it means to tame disbelief. Weeks passed, and what seemed to be an isolated episode became a movement. The small town of Saint-Étienne, once known only for vineyards and the occasional agricultural fair, was now a destination for caravans. People from everywhere came to see the man who tamed the impossible horse. But what they found upon arrival was always surprising. A simple old man, a dirt yard, a free horse grazing without fences, and a silence that said more than any advertisement. Alain refused to give long interviews, turned down invitations to talk shows, rejected all offers to sell the story to Parisian newspapers. "This isn't a spectacle," he would say. "It's just life, a life that almost slipped away from me." Little by little, the townspeople began to change. The village barber, who always spoke loudly and laughed at everything, began to look his clients in the eyes more calmly. The school teacher, who said children no longer listened to anyone, started reading Alain's letters aloud before class. The butcher, who hadn't spoken to his own father in years, reached out to him. If that old man was able to find a horse again after 15 years, then I can also find what I've lost. But there was something more, something subtle and powerful. People began to remember themselves, who they were, what they had abandoned. Remember the dream of becoming a vet. Remember that song you stopped singing. Remember when you believed you could change things, and all of it, because of an old man with Parkinson's, a sick woman, and a black horse. One day, the school principal knocked on Alain's door with an unexpected invitation. "We'd like you to come speak to our students." Alain widened his eyes. "Me? Speak to young people. They have too much energy and too little patience, and that's exactly why you should go," replied the principal with a smile. "Because they are surrounded by noise, and they need to hear the silence you carry." The following week, Alain went. He entered the classroom with slow steps. Some children laughed at seeing him tremble, but he didn't mind. He sat on a simple chair, took off his hat, and said, "Did you know a horse can remember the scent of the one who raised it? Even after 15 years, the laughter faded. And did you know that sometimes what tames a beast is not the whip, it's recognition?" One of the students raised a hand. "But weren't you afraid?" Alain smiled. "Every day. But love is just that, doing it even when you're afraid." At the end of the talk, a girl came closer. "My dad called me weak because I like taking care of animals. But now I think maybe I'm just trying to remember who I am." Alain held her hand. "Then never stop, because sometimes remembering is harder than learning." The tributes began to appear, letters, posters, touching reports. But Alain wasn't swayed. "I'm no hero," he would say. "I was just someone who didn't accept losing everything in silence." One afternoon, Vincent came back, this time with a different envelope. "It's an invitation, Mr. Dumas." "For what?" "To give your name to the club's main arena. We want to name it Alain Dumas Arena, where silence defeated the shout." Alain remained silent for long seconds, then smiled simply. "If it's to remember what truly matters, let it be." That same day, Jeanne managed to get out of bed. With Alain's help, she sat in the yard for the first time in months. Lightning approached, rested his muzzle on her lap, and stayed there, still. She cried in silence. "I thought I wouldn't live to see this." Alain simply held her hand. "We still have a lot to see, Jeanne, including ourselves." Time passed slowly, not like something that drags, but like something that learns to respect what blooms gently. Jeanne was now walking around the house with more strength. She no longer needed help to sit at the table, and sometimes she even forgot she had ever been bedridden. The illness was under control, but the true healing came from somewhere else, from presence. Lightning was still there. He didn't run away, didn't demand. He was like a living shadow of what had been forgotten and rediscovered with tenderness. At the end of the afternoons, Alain would sit beside the horse on a moss-covered tree stump, and they would stay there, man and animal, breathing in the same rhythm. There was no longer a need for words, because after everything, they understood each other in silence. The world around them seemed to have changed too. Children didn't just come to visit, they stayed to hear stories. Teenagers helped clean the yard. Parents, once distant, brought cakes, vegetables, bread. That once-forgotten house had now become a reference, not because of luxury, but because of memory. Jeanne, seeing all of it, said one night, "Have you noticed, Alain? Before, no one stopped by here. Now there's a line of people wanting to learn how to listen." He chuckled softly. "It's because we were invisible for too long. And when someone invisible speaks from the heart, even the world goes quiet to listen." A school from another town invited Alain to give a talk. "But I don't even speak properly with this tremor," he said, shy. "And that's exactly why you must go," replied the teacher, "because your voice trembles." But your truth doesn't. At the talk, a boy raised his hand and asked, "Did you feel too old to try?" The question hung in the air. Alain looked at the boy and answered with teary eyes, "Every day. But love gives strength where we only see fatigue." Silence, then applause, not of admiration but of recognition. The town decided to hold an official tribute. "We want to declare you an honorary citizen," said the mayor. "You've become a symbol of the best we have." Alain laughed, scratching his head. "The best of this town is remembering that no one is too small to change everything. Sometimes it just takes not giving up." Lightning now slept freely in the yard, but he had a favorite spot in front of Jean's bedroom window. He'd stay there, quiet, a sentinel of memory, a guardian of promises. She would say, He knows it was for me that all this happened." And deep down, I think he healed too. One afternoon, Alain walked with difficulty to the field. He sat next to Lightning. They stayed there, watching the reddish sky, just like that day of the competition. "If I go before you, will you take care of her for me?" The horse, as if understanding, rested his head on the old man's shoulder, and the two remained there, in silence, a silence more eloquent than any speech. That night, Jean found him sleeping with a soft smile on his face, breathing peacefully, heart calm, like someone who had fulfilled their mission, like someone who knew their time was ending with grace. The day Alain passed, there was no warning, there was no pain, only silence. Jean found him in the morning, eyes closed, sitting in his wooden chair, his hat still on his lap. His face was at peace, not like someone sleeping, but like someone who gave everything they could and was received. The news spread like a warm summer wind. The old man who tamed the impossible horse was gone. The town came to a halt. Literally, classes were suspended, shops closed out of respect, and no one questioned it because everyone knew what that man had represented. In the yard, Lightning refused to leave the chair's side. He stayed there the entire day, then the night, then the next day, not out of anger nor desperation, but mourning, a kind of mourning that doesn't scream, that understands. The funeral was simple, just as Alain wanted, but there were so many people the street looked like a procession of souls touched by a single gesture. Children held signs, heroes age too. He taught me to remember myself. Teenagers with red eyes carried wildflowers, elders hugged in silence, and even Vincent was there, holding a small bouquet. There were no cameras, there were no speeches, only respect, but the most moving sight was Lightning. He remained beside the coffin throughout the ceremony, head low, breathing slow, still, like one who understands that the end of a story doesn't erase what it planted. After the burial, Jean remained seated for hours by the window. The horse came, rested his muzzle on her shoulder. She cried, but not out of sadness, out of gratitude. "You stayed," just like he asked. In the months that followed, the house filled with visitors. But now, they came for another reason, to listen, to tell their stories, to remember that there's still time to start again. The town kept the arena's name, Alain Dumas, where silence defeated the shout. And in schools, one phrase was often repeated in class. I didn't tame him. I reminded him who he was, and he reminded me who I had been. Lightning lived there until the end of his days. He was never ridden again, never entered another competition. He was free, free like the love that rescued him and helped him remember who he was. Today, in that little town, when someone doubts themselves because of age, weakness, or feeling too small, there's always someone who says, "Remember Alain? He was just an old man too, and he changed everything."